we are here today with Jessica Renner, one of the top female throwers in WATL. And Jessica, first question, how long have you been throwing for?
Actually, it'll be 4 years in about a month here, sometime in the middle of the start of August. Yeah.
Wow. Now let's start off with specifically with hatchet. Tell us about your hatchet throwing technique. Any quirks? Like, do you twirl your axe mentally? Are you telling yourself anything before every throw? Tell us about like in the zone tournament, Jessica. Out for the win, out for the kill. How do you hold the axe? Tell us a bit more about how you throw and kind of the mental game behind it as well.
Yeah. So my throw has kind of evolved, especially this year, to be more of a traditional out front throw. So I start lining up with my left eye, since I'm left eye dominant. I have a little bit of an overlap between the eye and the axe, and then I pull back slowly to the side of my head. And the entire time I'm telling myself, don't throw too hard, don't grip it too hard, because those traditionally have been my biggest like bugaboos when I throw. So when I'm in a tournament, I kind of take that a little bit further, and I kind of adapt almost to Ryan Smith like methodical approach. So I'll go up, retrieve, swing my axe across my fingers a couple times, wipe the handle, wipe my hand, and then kind of breathe into the throw. So you take that breath of kind of like the same way when I go out to shoot or something.
Very cool. And do you find, and I believe Ryan Smith said, I think part of that breathing technique I know is also to kind of bring down, I guess it's before even like a sniper takes a shot. I think it brings down, it brings a certain stillness. Do you find it does the same when you're holding the axe?
Oh yeah, as I breathe out and just sit there holding like no breath, there's a calmness almost that you can kind of get into.
That's really cool. And now, what are you throwing right now?
I can actually show you.
Yeah. Oh, perfect.
Uh,
Okay, good. And while you're showing us, why don't you show us how you grip it? I wasn't sure if you had an axe. That was going to be my next question.
oh yeah,
I'm so
yeah.
glad you put it with you. Okay, cool. Show us the grip, show us the position, and tell us why you switched from maybe beside to front, and how that's changed your throw or your scoring, I should say.
Sure. So this is what I throw, a double bit of my own design, uh, custom engraved there and everything. This is for hatchet. For duels, I use a pretty much a stock king, although my duels partner has been kind enough to modify it mid-game a few times, right? So when I'm throwing, I have my hand about like this, kind of out front like this, and then you can see I'm lined up where I can almost see double with my thumb and my left eye. So I'll go here and then bring it back slowly to there and then forward and release. I have kind of a stretched out grip just to really balance the weight of the axe. You know, that's one of my things I've loved since I started was a nice balanced throw. So having a strong platform like that lets me hold the axe without having to like death grip it, which I find makes me throw a lot harder. So it's almost just resting there, you know, mostly just those two fingers.
And that's really interesting. And so you start at the front with your eye and then you bring it back to the side. Is that right? That's
Yes.
very interesting. I thought, because I've seen people hold it in front and then they flick it in front, but you're actually bringing it back then to the side. And are you like, I know Kump likes to do a flick of his ear, and I know he's cut it a few times. Have you ever had that problem? Do you go by the ear?
Yeah, so I'll come back right about here. I don't flick my ear. The issue I'll tend to have is, especially when I was adapting to the throws, I'd hit myself like right here in the cheek. Never to the point that I cut myself or anything, but definitely a reset moment. Kind of takes you out of the flow, you know?
Totally got it. Now, why the double bit? Do you find the balance is different?
The balance. So when I started throwing, I was using a Fox, and that had a pretty neutral balance. And back then, I was holding directly out in front of me,
Right.
and that made it comfortable to hold with that balance, right? Then, as time progressed, and I switched to the bear claw, and then had that same balance. Then last year, I got it in my head that I wanted to try a max weight hatchet, um, kind of as a way to address the throwing too hard problems I was having. I thought, well, if it's too heavy, I can't really throw it too hard, right? So I got a vintage double bit, and I profiled it down just a little bit, had Vin put a handle on it, and then that's where the double bit came from. This is the result of what I loved about that axe, just in a more realistic manner, because this weighs just about the same as my king at like 2 pounds, 5 ounces. So was that 11 ounces lower than I was throwing last September or at Worlds, for example?
And what I think a lot of viewers don't realize and they don't know about you is you're actually a phenomenally talented industrial designer.
Thank
And
you.
most people don't realize, and they don't know this. And you and I have had a lot of conversations, I think, over the last maybe year and a half about some of the product work that you've done and licensing out designs that you've done. The one that you've noted is the Bear Claw, which, funny enough, it came out that we both had designed almost identical axe heads.
Yeah.
Waddle did not go ahead and publish it, but what I want to do is I want to give people an idea of the understanding of how uh, deeply knowledgeable you are about these products, because for a living, I'm designing these and I'm creating them, and you're creating, I would say, superior designs to what we're doing. And so can you tell us a bit more about the approach that you take to the designing of the axes, your industrial design background, and some of the stuff that you're working on right now, including making these custom heads for some of the top throwers?
Sure, yeah. So product design at its core is all about problem solving. And that's where the bear claw came from. Because, I started with that flying fox, and it's a, great axe, great balance and all that. But as anyone who's thrown one knows, you go a quarter inch into the board and you start to lose coverage. So the bear claw came about primarily because I wanted to extend the beard of that. And then some other stuff, I brought the cutting edge forward just to make the neutral rotation a little bit more palatable. Because with the fox, you tend to under rotate if you want to get full coverage. So fixed that. I adjusted the weight balance a little bit. And then from there, that worked great. People seem to love that. I still have people asking me for those regularly today. But for me, this was an evolution of that even. So I kept the same beard, but what I was noticing on the previous double bit I was throwing was I would really easily lose coverage on the top. So that turned into, well, let's just make a horn, so to speak, at the top of the axe and use what worked already to make something that I'm going to love throwing. I don't think anyone except me throws this currently. There's a few out there. But yeah, people still love the bear claw, and I think it's because I took a problem-solving approach to an already popular axe and just made it that much better,
Yeah, it's a beautiful head. For those who don't know, I mean, I think type it on Google, look for the Bear Claw Axe Head by Jessica Renner, and you'll see a very beautiful product. Now, Big Axe. Are you throwing Big Axe?
I do, yeah. I throw a stock general, actually.
Nice. And tell us about your Big Axe technique, how you grip it, how you throw it. Any advice that you would have to anyone that is looking to improve their game on Big Axe?
So actually, up until a year ago, I was still doing a two-hand step throw, and then kind of had a trial by fire moment at Titantown last year. I'd gotten really frustrated, was just kind of sick of it. And then Dustin Wellman put a double bit, or not a double, but put a big axe in my hand and said he was going to teach me how to throw one-handed. So still went with a step for a little bit, but got to a one-handed throw. And then as a consequence of throwing that 3-pound hatchet, I was able to transition to a one-handed standing throw and big axe as well. It worked those muscles to the point that I can just hold it out in front of me and be fine. So with that, I will take kind of this, I'm going to use this as a reference, this type of grip right out in front of me. I'll aim, and I'm on a 23-inch handle, but I'm probably 8 inches from the bottom. I'll line up with my pointer finger, bring it back and kind of sit it like this, and then almost just loft it into the board. So it's not a power thing at that point. And that's, when I was working as a coach at Axe House, that was a big thing I taught people was it's not about the power. The axe is sharp. You just have to get it there, right? Because you'd have people that would come up and just want to muscle this thing. And then even, competitive throwers, when they see a big axe, they think, oh, I really need to drive that in there. When in reality, it's the same as hatchet. You just have to get it there,
And that's very interesting that you bring that up. I was literally just talking to Kendra Colmea actually about Big Axe, and I was telling her, I was like, I have no idea how anyone holds a big axe with one hand. Like that is just, it's such an impossible thought to me because, you're exhausted, but the way you throw makes complete sense because both Kendra and I, like traditionally, like if I were to throw one hand, I'm holding it at the bottom, but if you're 8 inches above, the
Mhm.
weight kind of balances itself, I'm assuming, with the bottom of the weight of the handle because you're so high up on the handle. And then also, it looks like a lot of the weight is then now when you're positioning up this way, it's off the wrists. I think you know what I mean. That the big problem with an axe is like if you're holding it like this, and so you're flicking your wrist, and basically all the weight is on your wrist. But if you're, I guess, gripping it and then holding it up, at that point it ends up being more of a tricep extension, which I think is a lot more feasible. That's interesting. I'm actually going to try that. What you're saying makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so you might remember Jacob Wagner, who won, I think, the most improved big axe thrower last year.
Yes.
So he throws at Axe House Cleveland as well,
Mhm.
and I kind of picked that up from him. And then that was a combination with I watched Lucas throw a lot, and he holds his big axe a little bit choked up, and that's kind of where that came from. So it was a combination of two different techniques that came out of a result of me finally wanting to figure out big axe because for the longest time it was just like well, I'm here, I might as well, right? But that was my effort to actually like take it a little more seriously.
And that's awesome, and this is what I love about like having these interviews and doing these interviews. And this is where I think I would encourage people to go to tournaments because if you're not watching these videos, this is the type of information that you would get in tournaments. If you're, let's say you're not a great thrower and you're wanting to be great and you're worried about, I'm going to go 1-2, there's no point of going to the tournament. You learn so much at these tournaments, and like the amount of knowledge that is shared, and at the end of the day, like, some of the people that you've seen on TV, these kind of, big personalities, they're awesome people and they're approachable, and you can get all the advice that you want from them or from anyone else or from yourself. And that's probably the big thing that I would say to people is go to tournaments for these reasons, because it's this sharing of knowledge. Everyone just wants to help everyone else kind of improve, and I think that's what's great about the community. Now, tell us a bit more about the handle. Actually, I noticed that the handle that you have, does that have a flat head? Is it more of a rectangular shape?
Yeah, so this was done by Rain Axe Co. David Carroll here,
Yeah.
one of my many duels partners. So we have a flat
Nice.
front with a nice rounded on the corner here. And then he does this little chamfer at the bottom that I like to kind of just rest my pinky on there.
Yeah.
This radius came out of how I hold it. I was getting a little bit of a blister, so I had him round that over a little bit more on the back. And it just sits really comfortably right there. I think we're at about 16 inches on the front here, and then I think this is about 17.
Very nice. And so the bottom part, when you're holding it, that's more rounded out than the top part, correct? That's smart.
Yes.
Yeah, that's how I would want it as well. And WATL has actually started producing, and we're the only ones that we know of that are producing basically square head handles now, because and I'm sure you probably found it as well, as I find it's easier to tell when there's a slight turn, because it right now, the way WATL is and where we are with axe throwing is, it's a game of millimeters, and the slightest little turn of your axe head, that's the difference between you and winning or losing a match, or maybe even winning or losing a whole tournament. And so I find with the square handles, it is so much easier to tell when there's a slight twist, even if it's a fraction of a millimeter. And that's why I'm a fan. I'm assuming, is that why you switched over as well, or does it just overall fit better?
For me, it's mostly stability, so kind of the same idea.
Yeah.
It gives you a nice solid platform, and you get a lot more contact with this part of your finger than if you're just holding it in the groove.
Right.
And actually, with my duals axe, which is, like I said, a stock king, I took that off the shelf, and it was a square handle one, and it was a marathon where I first used it. We would throw 3 games, and I would run to the belt sander, shape it a little bit, just to kind of get it perfect. But that square handle was perfect to start off with, though.
Nice. That's great to hear. Now, what would you say would be, if you could give some advice to throwers that are starting off? What would that be?
Don't be afraid to ask people who you think of as great throwers questions. I have met no one in this community who will not offer some advice or help you out or give you a little bit of a tip or trick or something. Now, maybe like if you see someone like lose the finals of a tournament, that may not be the right time. But just in general, if you're at a tournament hanging out, waiting for your bracket, or if, just want some advice, everyone is very approachable. You just have to approach them. Like, don't be intimidated. I mean, some of these people who, when I started going to tournaments 2 years ago, I saw as those like kind of mythic figures, right, are now close friends just because I made an effort and said hello, you know?
So that's awesome. And one thing I don't know if we elaborated too much on, which I would love to hear from you on, is how do you deal with the mental part of the game, the nerves, high pressure matches? Everyone feels them, and again, I'm going back to Kendra because she brought up an interesting point. Is she's like, if someone tells you they don't get nervous, it's because they just don't care, and it makes sense. But for the most part, I think 99.9% of people care of all their matches, any matches, and they do get nerves, especially at the tournament level. So, what are some tips and tricks that you can share from your experience that can help people overcome this?
So for me, a big part is just staying in the moment, which that methodical, like I'll walk back from the board, do that, wipe my hand off. And that little routine keeps me focused on what I'm doing. And then also just acknowledging that everyone does feel that stuff. So it's not just me, that my opponent is going through the same exact thing I'm going through, even if they're not showing it. And if you can stay in that mindset that it's not just you, that you can just stay on your target, it helps deal with it some. But there's always those days where you're just gonna kind of be off and not be able to handle it. And then you have those days where everything just kind of clicks and you just kind of fly, right? And I think an important thing there is if you have a bad throw or if you have a bad game, just try to let it go. Don't dwell on it. I mean, it's always going to suck. I'm not saying it's not going to, but if you sit there and tell yourself, how could I do that? What did I do? I embarrassed myself. It's only going to fester and make your next throw that much worse.
Um, it You reminded me of this clip that I saw, and I think it was a doctor that was basically talking about the power of negativity and how powerful it is to say to yourself, don't get a five, don't get a five, don't get a five, and then you get a five. It is much more powerful to say you're going to get a six, you're going to get a six, you're going to get a six, and that has happened to me personally, where I actually have said to myself, you know, you need a six to win. Don't get a five. Don't get a five. Don't get a five, and then you get the five. And it was kind of funny, hearing, I think it was a TikTok video, hearing this doctor kind of talk about how there's such a much more net positive force by giving yourself positive reinforcements. And I think part of that is a good element to have, at least mentally. And I love the fact that you have this routine, which is very similar to what Ryan Smith has, and it allows you to keep your head in the game. And everyone kind of deals with it differently. I believe Dr. Dan, I think he gets quiet. He doesn't talk to anyone. Like when you're in, his whole thing is like, when I'm in a match, like don't bother talking to me. Like, I'm not going to be laughing. I'm not going to be joking. I'm here to go for he's going for the jugular. And everyone's, different when they're in the lanes. I totally understand it. And I've seen it before, judging a few matches in the last couple of years where, some people just, they don't want to say hi. They're not there in their front, and that's okay. And I take zero personal offense to it, but that's literally what people do to get themselves in their headspace into the match, into the game. And they don't want to be smiling. They don't want to be, everyone's different. And then you have the extreme end example where you have Mike Kump, where if he's laughing and he's joking, he's going to destroy you. And that's where you should be really afraid, is when he's doing like somersaults or cartwheels. And so everyone deals with stress in a different way. And I appreciate you sharing your insights on that. One final thing, where can we get more information on your axe heads? Where can people purchase them? How can they reach out to you? Please let us know.
Main way for me right now is Facebook. I use the Axe Sales group. Occasionally, I post in the WATL group whenever I have some available. I've been doing them just kind of in batches these days. For me in general, like I said, Facebook, I'm on Instagram. I think it's Jessica Renner Creative. I don't post much anymore. I'd like to do photography, so I'll go out, take pictures, come back, right? But yeah, that's the main way. At some point, I'll get my website back up, I'm sure. But for now, if you have any questions, just reach out. I'm not going to turn anyone down for a conversation or any questions like that.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jess. I really appreciate the time. I really appreciate the interview, and it's great having you a part of the community. And honestly, just even for me personally, thank you for everything you help us with on the WATL side. A lot of people don't know the contributions you make on the back end, including helping us come up with some amazing trophies. You're unbelievably talented creative skills definitely come in handy, especially when we're struggling ourselves to come up with great, thoughtful prizes, and you always come in clutch. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, I'm happy to do it. It's a great way to still be involved with the sport, even if I'm not going to an event or don't think I might have a chance of winning something. A little bit of me is always there, right?